You know, people ask me what my first international missions trip was like. Well, I can remember it was just incredibly transforming. In 1996, a man by the name of Dr. Dale Yurton, who had been a guest speaker in our house for many years, he took a chance on me and walked up to me and said, would you consider going with me to Chiapas, Mexico? And Chiapas is the furthest southern state in Mexico. It borders Guatemala. It's also the poorest state. And I had no idea what Dr. Yurton even had in mind. I thought maybe he just wanted me to carry his briefcase for him. And I so highly revered him, I would have been glad to have done that. And but I said, what do you want me to do? He said, well, I want you to preach. I said, seriously? He said, yeah, I want you to preach. I said, okay. So just almost on a whim, I started getting my passport and everything ready to go on this particular trip, and found myself in January of 1996 in Chiapas, Mexico with Dr. Dale Yurton. And I remember we missed our connection, so we had to stay overnight in Tuxtla in the city of, in the state of Chiapas. And so the next morning, we got to Huixla, Mexico, a little bitty Mexican town, 20 minutes from the Guatemala border. And he says to me, we're riding from the hotel to the meeting. He said, I want you to start the meeting off this morning. I said, start the meeting off? What do you mean? You want me to open with prayer? He said, no, I want you to preach. I said, preach? You want me to start this thing? He said, don't tell me I brought you all the way to Chiapas, Mexico, boy, just for you to tell me that you can't preach. So I stepped out on that platform and looked into the face of about 1,000 pastors. Most of these guys had been pastoring longer than I had been alive. And I remember being so scared, my knees were shaking together. First time I'd ever spoken through an interpreter. And I started preaching this little innocuous, weak, anemic little message, probably that was entitled The Value of a Smile, something like that. And I'm preaching, I'm about 10 minutes into this message, my knees are knocking together, and all of a sudden my interpreter, he begins to elbow me. And I said, dude, I'm trying to preach here. He said, look what's going on. I said, what? He said, look. And I looked out there, and the Spirit of God, the presence of God had come and filled that place. And these guys, these pastors were falling out under the power of God, just falling down on the ground. It's amazing. And I said to my interpreter, what do I do? What do I do? He said, well, stop preaching and get down there and pray for them. And he said, I'll begin to interpret for you. If the Lord gives you any kind of a prophetic word, we'll work through it. And that was my introduction to missions. And 2 years later, I was able to sell the business that I had previously owned for 16 years and went into full-time missions and evangelism, and we formed Impartation Ministries. And that's what we've done now for the last 18 years, is take the gospel of Jesus around the world to different nations. God has been so faithful. It's just been absolutely amazing. Story after story I could tell you what God's done. It still amazes me to this day.